Here's something that will blow your mind. Amazon just overtook Sweden. Not in stock price, not in profits, but in sheer economic output. One company now generates as much as an entire advanced country. And it gets crazier. Amazon does it with a fraction of the people Sweden does. That's the power of scale, technology, and artificial intelligence-driven infrastructure. Today, we're going to break down just how insane Amazon's growth is, why it's becoming a nation-sized force, what that means for the future of power, and what it means for surviving in a world run by megacorporations. Before we dive into the numbers, let's take a step back and look at what Amazon actually does. Most people think of it as just an online store. You know, buying stuff with Prime, maybe streaming a TV show, but that's only the surface. Amazon is actually a giant tech and logistics powerhouse. There's the retail side, sure, but the real engine driving growth and profits is AWS, Amazon Web Services. That's their cloud and data center business, and it's basically the backbone of the internet and artificial intelligence. Without it, a lot of the online world wouldn't run. Now, back to the comparison. In the last 12 months, Amazon brought in about $670 billion in revenue. Sweden as a country clocks in at around $600 billion in GDP. Let that sink in for a second. One company producing more economic output than an entire advanced economy. And it gets wilder. Sweden has over 5 million workers, while Amazon gets it done with roughly 1.5 million employees. That's why we said Amazon does it with a fraction of the workers. Crazy, right? Drop a like if you ever thought about Amazon like this. It's a glimpse at the kind of concentrated power technology and scale can create, and why companies like Amazon are starting to feel more like nations than businesses. Here's where it gets uncomfortable though, because if one company can rival an entire advanced nation in economic output and do it with a fraction of the workforce, what does that say about the future of jobs? About power? About control? Sweden uses GDP to fund healthcare, education, and public services. Amazon's revenue? That wealth flows into the hands of shareholders, executives, and reinvestments designed to make the company even bigger. This is where it gets dystopian though. As Amazon grows, it stops looking like a business competing in the free market and starts looking like a sovereign entity. A private empire with its own infrastructure, its own labor force, even its own rules. But unlike a nation, Amazon doesn't answer to citizens. It only answers to its shareholders. In a world where corporations rival nations, the only real vote might be owning shares. If Amazon can already rival a nation like Sweden, imagine what happens as artificial intelligence, automation, and robotics kick in. The gap between what a corporation can do and what a government can do only widens. Historically, power was tied to governments, armies, and borders. But today, the battlefield is data, logistics, and capital. Amazon sits at the center of all three. This isn't unprecedented. We've seen private entities like the East India Company or Rockefeller's Standard Oil wield enormous power before. But the difference is those giants still relied on governments. Amazon and its peers, they're building systems so vast and essential that governments might end up relying on them. That's not competition anymore, that's sovereignty. The uncomfortable reality is, if corporations are becoming the new sovereigns, then stock ownership is basically citizenship. Owning shares is the closest thing you'll ever get to having a vote in this new world. Because let's be real, Amazon isn't going to shrink. Governments may regulate, they may fine, but history shows us something. The larger and more essential a corporation becomes, the harder it is to rein it in. That's why, for investors, the game isn't just about picking companies anymore. It's about aligning yourself with the emerging empires of the future. You don't need to agree with it. You don't even need to like it. But if you don't own a piece of it, you're just another citizen living under its rules with zero say in how it operates. This isn't about investment opportunities anymore. It's about survival. But enough with the theory. Let's see what the numbers actually look like. Amazon's revenue line looks like a rocket. Today, they're pulling in about $670 billion a year. That's wild, since just 10 years ago, they were under $150 billion. Now, growth has slowed from 20% a year to closer to 10%. Don't focus on that though. At this scale, Amazon won't be able to make impressive percentage growth numbers. What matters is raw dollar growth. Amazon is still adding about $60 billion in revenue every single year. That's like adding an entire Fortune 500 company annually. And profits, they've exploded. EBITDA margins, basically the clean measure of profitability, have grown from around 8% in 2016 to about 20% today. Net income, which used to barely exist because Amazon plowed everything into growth, has surged. But here's what makes Amazon unique. They still plow money into growth. They spend almost $200 billion a year on R&D and capital expenditures combined. That's more than the GDP of most countries. It's also more than double what Microsoft spends. And yet, even with all that spending, profits keep climbing. Why? Because the real engine isn't retail. It's AWS, Amazon Web Services. That's their cloud and data center business, and it's massively profitable. AWS is basically the backbone of the internet and artificial intelligence. Without it, half the digital economy wouldn't run. Here's the part you really need to focus on though. Amazon could easily return profits to shareholders, but they don't. No dividend, barely any share buybacks. The share count actually grows 1.3% per year. Why? Because Amazon is playing the longest game possible. They're not trying to milk the business like many companies do once they become profitable. They're trying to own the future. Are you convinced you need to own a piece of this empire? Let me know in the comments. Let's now put a valuation number on Amazon. If Amazon keeps adding about $60 billion a year in revenue, 5 years from now, we're looking at an extra $300 billion in revenue. Add that to their current revenue, and that's $970 billion in revenue. I think profit margins will keep expanding. So let's say they have a 15% profit margin on the business. That's $145 billion in profits. Put even a reasonable price to earnings multiple on that, let's say 30, and you're talking about a market cap north of $4 trillion, almost double today. That's around an 84% gain in 5 years, or about 13% annualized. That's right in line with the long-term S&P returns. The key point though is that with Amazon, you're not just investing in a company, you're buying citizenship in a private empire. Here's what I think. Even if Amazon's returns over the next 5 years end up roughly in line with the overall market, this isn't just about beating benchmarks anymore. This is about owning a piece of a sovereign-level powerhouse, a company that controls massive data centers, leads in robotics and warehouse automation, and is building the backbone of artificial intelligence. That's a level of influence most nations can't match. There's a real potential here for growth to re-accelerate. Maybe AWS expands faster than anyone expects. Maybe automation and artificial intelligence open entirely new revenue streams. And even if that doesn't happen, the scale, the infrastructure, and the influence Amazon has already built make it one of the few companies in the world you simply have to own if you want a stake in the future. The key thing I want you to take away is this. This isn't just a stock, it's a vote in the new power structure. Without shares in these mega corporations, you don't get a say in how the world is run. Owning Amazon isn't just smart investing, it's survival. If this breakdown gave you a fresh perspective on Amazon, a like goes a long way. If you want to talk about stocks or our dystopian future that I think is coming, join me over on Discord. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks. Bye.